Tomorrow never comes. Let those words sink in for a moment. Tomorrow never comes. And yet you've built your entire life around that lie. Tomorrow I'll start going to the gym. Tomorrow I'll talk to that person. Tomorrow I'll begin that project I've been postponing for months. Tomorrow I'll stop being who I am and become who I'm supposed to be. But here's the truth no one wants to face, that tomorrow you worship so faithfully is where your ambitions go to die. I know you. I know exactly who you are because I was you. You have clear goals. You know what you want. You can describe it with almost photographic precision. You see your successful life so clearly, you can almost touch it. The business running, the fit body, the relationships that work, financial freedom, peace of mind. You see it all with a clarity that takes your breath away. And precisely because you see it so clearly, you freeze and stare at it instead of building it. It's like standing in front of a window, watching the life you could have without daring to open the door and walk toward it. Because you're not like the others. The others don't have ambition, you do. The others settle for little, you want more. The others don't understand what it's like to be hungry for greatness. You feel it every day, and it's exactly that ambition that has become your prison. You've learned to feel good planning instead of executing. You've become addicted to the feeling of potential without the risk of real failure. You live in the world of infinite possibilities because there you never have to face your real limits. There you can be perfect because you've never tried anything. There you can preserve the fantasy of your greatness without having to prove it. It's 3 in the morning and you can't sleep. The thought comes back again. That project you were going to start, that conversation you were going to have, that change you were going to make. And you feel that toxic mix of guilt and frustration you know so well. You promise yourself that tomorrow will be different, this time for real. You close your eyes with that promise, and when you wake up, the cycle starts again. Because your brain has learned the trick. It knows that if it promises you a glorious tomorrow, it can keep you still today. And you fall into that trap over and over again, as if it were the first time. As if promise number 100 were different from promise number 1. If you're between 28 and 44, I know your specific version of this hell. It's the anxiety of, I should have more by my age. You see others on social media who seem more successful, more advanced, more fulfilled. You feel like you fell behind in a race you never agreed to run. Your parents ask you when you're going to settle down, and you don't even know what that means. You feel the pressure to build something meaningful, but also to enjoy life before it's too late. You're tired, but you can't stop, because stopping means admitting you might not get where you thought you would. Burnout isn't being tired. It's being tired of going nowhere despite being exhausted. It's waking up every day, running toward a goal that moves away at the same speed you do. It's feeling like you're doing everything and getting nowhere. It's the frustration of having energy and ambition, but not knowing how to turn them into real results. And if you're between 45 and 59, your pain has another name. It's that question that jolts you awake. Is this it? You achieved things. You built a career. You have responsibilities. But something broke along the way. The marriage that was once fire is now routine. The children you idealized now disappoint you or ignore you. Your parents are aging, and suddenly you're the one who has to hold everything together. You're in a position of power, but you feel lonelier than when you had nothing. Your body doesn't respond the way it used to. And worst of all, you can no longer hide behind the excuse of time. If you didn't do it by now, When will you? The future is no longer an infinite promise. It's a resource that's running out. You look ahead and see more past than future. And that terrifies you, because it means you can no longer keep postponing what truly matters. Both generations, two versions of the same hell. Procrastination is not laziness. It's not a lack of discipline. It's not that you don't know what to do. It's something much deeper and much more dangerous. It's fear disguised as planning. It's cowardice dressed up as perfectionism. It's the most elegant form of self-sabotage that exists, because it lets you feel productive while you destroy your life. It lets you feel busy while you avoid what matters. It lets you feel ambitious while you stay exactly where you are. And here's what no one tells you. Every day that passes without action is not neutral. It's not just a lost day you can recover tomorrow. Every day of procrastination multiplies the cost of starting. It's like a debt that accrues compound interest. The first day you skip the gym is easy to recover from, but after 30 days your body has changed. After 6 months, your identity has changed. You're no longer someone who stopped going to the gym. You're someone who doesn't go to the gym. Do you see the difference? Procrastination doesn't just steal your time, it steals your identity. It slowly turns you into someone who doesn't act. And that transformation is almost invisible until one day you wake up and you don't recognize yourself anymore. The Stoics knew this 2,000 years ago. Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations while ruling an empire at war, dealing with a pandemic that killed thousands every day, facing constant betrayals, and watching his own children die one by one. Seneca wrote about the value of time while living under the constant threat of a mad emperor who would eventually force him to take his own life. Epictetus wrote about freedom while he was a slave, and later lived with a leg destroyed by his former master, who broke it deliberately. These men did not write philosophy from ivory towers. They didn't write abstract theories from the comfort of a library. They wrote truth from the trenches of impossible lives. They wrote with blood, with pain, with real experience. And they all agree on one thing: time is the only thing you truly have, and you are wasting it waiting for the perfect moment that will never come. This is not another motivational episode that will make you feel good for 30 minutes and that you'll forget tomorrow. I'm not going to give you pretty quotes for your wallpaper. I'm not going to make you feel comfortable with your mediocrity. I'm going to show you 10 psychological shifts the Stoics discovered centuries ago and that modern neuroscience is confirming today. 10 mental patterns that are sabotaging every attempt you make to change. And more importantly, I'm going to give you the exact tools to break those patterns. Not theory, tools, specific actions you can implement today if you have the courage to do it. I'm not speaking to you as a guru who has everything figured out. I'm speaking to you as someone who stood where you stand, who felt that paralysis, who spent years promising changes that never came, and who finally understood that you don't need more motivation. You need more brutal honesty about how your mind actually works and why you systematically sabotage what you want most. You need to see the invisible mechanisms that keep you trapped, because you can't escape a prison you don't know exists. Here's the paradox that's killing you. You don't procrastinate what doesn't matter. You procrastinate exactly what matters most. That project that could change your life. That conversation that could save your relationship. That habit that could transform your health. Those are the things you postpone. Why? Because the more important something is, the more afraid you are to fail at it. It's safer not to try and preserve the fantasy of future success than to try and face your real limits. It's more comfortable to live with the potential of greatness than with the reality of being ordinary. The next 30 minutes are going to make you uncomfortable. They're going to force you to look into a mirror you've probably been avoiding. But that discomfort is exactly what you need. Because comfort is the enemy of growth, and you've grown too comfortable with your discomfort. You've gotten used to living with that tension between who you are and who you want to be. It doesn't even hurt that much anymore. And that's the most dangerous sign of all. When pain becomes familiar, it stops motivating you to change. This episode will give you a map. But a map is useless if you don't start walking. And the only way to start walking is to understand that the tomorrow you're waiting for doesn't exist. Only today exists, this moment, this decision. And what you do in the next 10 minutes after listening to this will say more about your future than all the perfect plans you've made in the last 10 years. Because plans are fantasy, action is reality. Seneca wrote something that should be carved into your mind. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. Think about that. Really think about it. You don't lack time. You're wasting it while waiting to have more. It's like dying of thirst next to a river because you're waiting for the perfect cup to drink from. The water is there. It's always been there. But you're dying of thirst because you won't drink without perfect conditions. So here's your first real choice. You can listen to this episode the way you've listened to 100 others. You can nod, feel inspired, promise that now you'll change, and tomorrow be exactly the same. Or you can do something different. You can decide that this is the moment the lie of tomorrow stops working. That this is the breaking point. Not because you suddenly have more willpower or more motivation, but because you finally understood that the person you're waiting to become tomorrow is just an elegant way of avoiding being who you can be today. It's a sophisticated excuse to keep being mediocre. The first lesson is going to shatter the most dangerous illusion you have about yourself. And once you understand how your brain is systematically betraying you, you won't be able to fall into the same trap with the same innocence. Get ready. What's coming is not comfortable, but it's true. And truth is the only thing that will set you free. Comfort keeps you imprisoned. Brutal truth sets you free. Before we begin, I need you to do something. Don't think about it. Just do it. Write this in the comments right now before continuing. I stop postponing my life. I start now. Nothing else. Don't explain. Don't justify yourself. Write it and continue. If you wrote it, good. Now, continue with the same brutal honesty you just committed to, because what comes next won't give you permission to stay the same. It will show you, without decoration, how you've been sabotaging yourself, and when you see it clearly, you won't be able to look away anymore. First, Stoic lesson: the trap of the imaginary future. Your brain is playing a game with you, and you don't even know you're playing. It's a game so sophisticated, so perfectly calibrated, that you've spent years losing without realizing you were even in a match. The game is called treating your future self as if they were another person, and your brain does this automatically, constantly, without asking your permission. It's a survival mechanism that evolved to protect you from immediate pain, but now it's slowly destroying you. Neuroscientists have proven this with brain scans. When you think about yourself 6 months from now, a year from now, 5 years from now, your brain activates the exact same regions it uses when you think about a complete stranger. This is not a metaphor. It's not an exaggeration. It's literal. Your brain processes your future self as if they were another person living in another dimension. someone you have zero real obligations toward. It's as if there were two versions of you operating in parallel realities that never meet. That's why it's so easy. That's why the lie works so well. You make promises to that future. You, the same way you would make promises to a stranger you'll never see again. That future guy is going to go to the gym every day. That future guy is going to wake up early and be disciplined. That future guy is going to have hard conversations and make brave decisions. And meanwhile, present you stays on the couch watching shows because, after all, that's not your problem. It's the other guy's problem, the one who comes later, the stranger who lives in tomorrow. Marcus Aurelius understood this mental trap almost 2,000 years ago without the need for brain scanners. He wrote something in his meditations that should make you tremble. Do not act as if you were going to live 10,000 years. Death hangs over you. While you live, while it is possible, be good. He wasn't being dramatic. He was being brutally precise. Because he knew what you know but don't want to admit. Every time you say tomorrow, you are betting that you will have a tomorrow. And eventually, you are going to lose that bet. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. But there's something even more perverse about this trap. You don't just treat your future self like a stranger. You idealize them. You turn them into an upgraded version of you who doesn't need to struggle because they're naturally disciplined. That future you doesn't have to fight procrastination because they magically overcame it. That future you has no fear, no doubt, no weakness. It's a version of you that will never exist because you're waiting for it to appear without doing the work of building it. It's like waiting for a building to construct itself while you watch from a distance. Think about all the promises you've made to that future you. On Monday, I'll start the diet. On January 1st, I'll change my life. When I finish this project, I'll focus on my health. When I have more money, I'll travel. When I have more time, I'll write that book. When things calm down, I'll fix my relationship. How many of those promises did you keep? And how many did you simply renew with a new date? It's like having a debt you never pay, only refinance endlessly with higher and higher interest. The reason you keep falling into this is because it works perfectly as immediate emotional relief. The moment you make the promise, your brain releases dopamine. You feel that small rush of hope, that feeling that this time it will be different. And that feeling is so pleasant that your brain chases it again and again. You became addicted not to real change, but to the promise of change. Addicted not to results, but to the fantasy of results. It's like someone addicted to buying lottery tickets who never checks if they won. The pleasure is in the possibility, not in the reality. Epictetus said it in a way so simple it hurts. How much longer are you going to wait before you demand the best of yourself? He asked that question 2,000 years ago, and you still don't have an answer. You're still waiting. But what exactly are you waiting for? The perfect moment? It doesn't exist. To feel ready? You will never feel ready. To have more clarity? Clarity comes from action, not before it. Clarity is the result of moving, not the prerequisite for moving. Here's what's really happening. Every promise you make to your future self is a way to avoid the discomfort of your present self. It's a way to postpone the necessary pain of real change. Because change hurts. It requires abandoning comfortable habits. It requires facing your current mediocrity. It requires admitting that you've been lying to yourself all this time. And your brain will do anything to avoid that pain. Even sacrifice your future. Even destroy your dreams. Because future pain is abstract. Present pain is real. Seneca wrote something in his letters to Lucilius that we should all tattoo into our minds. Begin at once to live and count each separate day as a separate life. Don't wait for your life to start. Your life is happening now. This moment is your life. And you are wasting it waiting for a better moment that will never arrive, because when it does, you'll be waiting for the next one. It's an endless cycle, a perfect trap, and the only way out is to break it today. So here's the question you have to ask yourself and answer with brutal honesty. If that future you never arrives, if it turns out that today is all you have, what are you going to do with the next 24 hours? Not the next 1,000, not the next year. The next 24 hours, because that's all you actually have. The rest is fantasy. The rest is the lie your brain tells you to keep you comfortable in your prison. Neuroscience gives us a tool to break this trap. It's called temporal collapse. It's a simple but brutal technique. Every time you catch yourself saying, tomorrow, ask yourself, what if tomorrow doesn't exist? What if I only had today? This is not an abstract philosophical exercise, it's literal. Because one day you will have a day that is your last day, and that day will not come with a warning. It will not say, this is your last day, so you'd better do everything you've been postponing. It will be a normal day where you kept postponing until you couldn't anymore, and all that will remain will be the broken promises you made to that future you who never arrived. Marcus Aurelius lived this truth every day. As Emperor of Rome, he constantly faced death. In wars against barbarians on the borders of the empire, in diseases that ravaged Rome and killed tens of thousands, in the betrayals of generals and senators who wanted his position and power. He knew any day could be his last. That's why he wrote, "You could be good right now, if only you would stop telling yourself that you will be good later." Read that again, slowly. You could be good right now. You don't need to wait. You don't need circumstances to change. You need to stop living in an imaginary future and start living in the only time that exists, now, in this present moment, which is the only real thing you have. Everything else is an illusion created by your mind to protect you from the pain of acting. Here's your practical action for this lesson. Not tomorrow, now. You're going to make a mental list of the 3 things you've promised your future self. The 3 things you've been postponing for weeks, months, or years, and you're going to choose the smallest one, not the most important one, the smallest one. And in the next 2 hours, you're going to take one step, just one, toward that thing. Not to complete it, just to start it. Because the goal is not to finish. The goal is to break the pattern of postponing. The goal is to show your brain that your future self does not exist. Only you exist. Now. And what you do now will determine whether the future you imagine has any chance of existing at all. Action today is worth more than 1,000 plans for tomorrow. The trap of the imaginary future only works if you keep believing in it. The moment you understand that your future self is an illusion, the moment that temporal distance your brain created collapses, everything changes. Because you can no longer hide behind empty promises. You can no longer outsource your life to an imaginary version of you that will never arrive. You have to face the uncomfortable truth that you, right now, with all your limitations and all your fears, are the only one who can do the work right now. No one else is coming to save you. There is no more capable future version waiting to take over. And that is terrifying. But it's also liberating, because it means you don't have to wait to become someone else. You can start exactly as you are, imperfect, afraid, doubting, but starting, because starting imperfectly is infinitely more valuable than planning perfectly and never starting. The Stoics didn't believe in perfection. They believed in progress. And progress requires movement. And movement requires that you stop living in your head and start living in reality. It requires that you accept that the imperfect person you are today is enough to take the first step. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be brave. The imaginary future is comfortable because there you can be perfect without effort. But that future is not real. The only thing that is real is this moment. And what you choose to do with it will say more about who you are than 1,000 promises about who you will be. Because promises are words, actions are truth. And the truth of who you are is revealed not in what you say you'll do tomorrow, but in what you do today when no one is watching and no one is holding you accountable except yourself. When it's easier to postpone than to act, when it's more comfortable to stay where you are than to move toward where you want to go. Those moments define who you really are. Second Stoic lesson: destroy the identity of "I'll start tomorrow." Now we go deeper. Because the problem isn't just that you treat your future self like a stranger. The problem is that you've built an entire identity around being someone who is going to change someday. That identity is your prison, and the worst part is that it's a comfortable prison, so comfortable that you don't want to leave. You've decorated that cell with promises and plans and visualizations, and now you feel at home inside it. You've forgotten that you're imprisoned. Let me ask you something. Who are you really? Not who you want to be, not who you plan to be. Who are you based on your actions over the last 30 days? Because that is the only real measure of identity. Not your intentions, not your goals, your repeated actions. And if you're brutally honest, you probably don't like the answer to that question. The person your actions say you are is probably very different from the person your words say you are, and that gap is where your suffering lives. Marcus Aurelius wrote something most people quote, but almost no one really understands. Very soon you will be ashes or a skeleton, and either a name or not even a name. And what we now call fame is vanity. Everything you seek in life comes down to this: act justly, think clearly, accept what you cannot control. He wasn't being pessimistic, he was being real, because he understood something fundamental. Your identity is not what you say you are. It's what you do when no one is watching. It's what you choose when you have the option to choose. It's how you respond when things get hard and no one is looking, and you have chosen to be someone who starts tomorrow. That is your real identity right now. It doesn't matter how many times you say you're ambitious or disciplined or committed. If your actions don't back up those words are lies you tell yourself to feel better about your mediocrity. They're decorations in the cell of your prison, motivational posters on the walls of a life you're not actually living. Neuroscience confirms this in a brutal way. Your brain has something called cognitive dissonance. It's the mental discomfort you feel when your actions don't match your identity. And your brain has two ways to resolve that discomfort. Option 1, change your actions to match your identity. Option 2, change your identity to match your actions. Guess which one is easier? Changing your identity. That's why people who don't go to the gym eventually stop saying, "I'm someone who isn't going to the gym right now," and start saying, "I'm just not a gym person." See the trick? Your brain resolves the discomfort by changing who you think you are, instead of changing what you do. It's easier to redefine yourself as mediocre than to do the work of becoming exceptional. Epictetus was a slave for years. His leg was broken on purpose. His master did it out of cruelty, not by accident. He lived without freedom, without rights, without control over his own life. And yet he wrote about freedom with more authority than most people who have never faced real limitations. How? Because he understood that your identity doesn't come from your circumstances. It comes from your decisions. He decided to be free mentally, even while his body was enslaved. He decided to be wise, even without access to formal education. He decided to be virtuous, even when the world gave him 1,000 reasons to be bitter. He decided to be who he wanted to be, despite everything life took from him. He didn't wait to be free to act like a free man. He acted like a free man, and that eventually made him one. Because here is the truth no one wants to hear. You cannot change your habits without changing who you believe you are. Habits are symptoms of identity. If you see yourself as someone who is not disciplined, you can force yourself to be disciplined for a week, for a month, but eventually you will return to your baseline identity, because your brain always wins. You always return to who you believe you are. Willpower is finite. Identity is infinite. That's why New Year's resolutions fail. That's why diets don't work. That's why you can watch 1,000 motivational videos and still not move forward. Because you're trying to change behaviors without changing the identity that produces those behaviors. It's like trying to change your reflection in the mirror without changing what's standing in front of the mirror. It doesn't work. It has never worked. It will never work. You can break the mirror 1,000 times, and your reflection will still be the same when you get a new one. So here is the brutal question you have to answer right now. Who is the version of you who has already achieved what you want to achieve? Not what they look like, not what they have. Who are they? How do they think? How do they speak? How do they respond to failure? How do they start their day? What do they say no to? How do they treat people? How do they treat themselves? You need specific answers, because that person is not your future. That person has to be your present. That person has to start existing today, or they will never exist. Marcus Aurelius didn't wait to feel like an emperor, to act like an emperor. When he was named emperor at 40, he had already spent decades preparing himself for that role. Not because he knew he would be emperor, but because he decided to be someone worthy of leadership long before he had the title. He practiced virtue when no one was watching. He studied philosophy when he could have been partying. He disciplined himself when he could have indulged. And when the moment came, he didn't have to pretend. He already was that person. The title only confirmed what he had built in silence for years. You are doing the exact opposite. You're waiting to have the results before you act like the person who has those results. You're waiting to have money before you handle money like someone who is wealthy. You're waiting to have the body before you treat yourself like someone who takes care of themselves. You're waiting to be successful before you speak with the confidence of someone successful. And while you wait, you're reinforcing the identity of someone who waits. Someone who is always about to start, but never starts. Someone whose entire life is a rehearsal for a play that never opens. Someone who lives backstage, waiting for someone to tell them it's time to step on stage. Seneca said it with cutting clarity. We cannot control what happens to us, but we can control how we respond. Your identity is the sum of your responses, not the sum of what happens to you. If you respond like a victim, you are a victim. If you respond like someone in control, you are in control, not tomorrow, today, now, in this moment. The next time something goes wrong, the next time you face an obstacle, the next time you feel the temptation to postpone, your response in that moment is building your real identity. Every response is a vote, and you are voting all day long for the person you are becoming. Here is your practical task for this lesson, and it's uncomfortable on purpose. You're going to write a description of your successful self as if you were writing a movie character. 3 paragraphs. First paragraph: how that person thinks, what they believe, how they see the world, what they assume about themselves. Second paragraph: how that person acts, what they do on a normal day, how they respond to difficulties, what rituals they have. Third paragraph: how that person relates to others, how they treat people, what standards they have, what they tolerate and what they do not tolerate. And after you write it, you're going to read it every day for a week, not to motivate yourself, to remind yourself who you decided to be. Because the moment you start acting like that person, you become that person. Your brain cannot tell the difference between who you are and who you consistently act like. If you act long enough, it becomes real. Fake it until you become it, not until you make it. And here's the part that will make you the most uncomfortable. You start today, not when you feel ready, not when you have proof, not when circumstances are perfect. Today. In the next conversation you have, speak like that person. In the next decision you make, decide like that person. In the next obstacle you face, respond like that person. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for external validation. Just step into that role and let the world catch up. Because the world will not give you permission. The world only respects those who demand it through their actions. The Stoics called this PROCRASTINATE, constant attention, continuous vigilance over who you are being in each moment. Because every moment is an opportunity to reinforce the identity you want or the identity you already have. There is no neutrality. You are either building forward or falling backward. And most of the time, you are falling backward because you are on autopilot. You are letting your old identity dictate your actions instead of using your actions to build your new identity. You are being carried by the current instead of swimming against it. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations during military campaigns on the borders of the empire. He wrote at night, exhausted, after days of battles and impossible decisions that determined the life or death of thousands. And he still wrote. Why? Because he understood that maintaining your identity requires daily practice. It requires constantly reminding yourself who you decided to be, because the world will constantly push you back toward who you were. Old friends, old habits, old comforts, everything conspires to keep you the same, and if you don't actively fight that, you will return to who you've always been. Entropy isn't just physical, it's psychological. Everything drifts toward disorder if you don't actively maintain it. The identity of "I'll start tomorrow" is seductive because it requires no risk. You can hold on to that identity forever without ever testing yourself. You can live your whole life as someone with potential without ever having to face your real limits. But that is not a life. It is an endless waiting room. It is a slow death of everything you could have been. And when your last day finally comes, you will not regret the things you tried and failed at. You will regret the things you never tried because you were waiting for the perfect moment to become the person you already should have been. Here is the capture moment of this lesson. Listen to this and burn it into your mind. Your identity is not who you are. It is who you decide to be in each moment. And every moment you wait to become that person is a moment you are actively choosing to be who you don't want to be. It is not passive. It is a choice. A choice you make 1,000 times a day. And the sum of those choices is your life. Not tomorrow, today, now. In this exact moment, you are choosing who you are. And that choice matters more than any circumstance, more than any limitation, more than any excuse. Because that choice is the only thing you truly control. Third Stoic lesson, the principle of inverted friction. Good habits need zero friction. Bad habits need maximum friction. This is one of the simplest and most ignored truths about human change. And it's so powerful that it can transform your entire life if you truly understand it and apply it without mercy. Epictetus taught this 2,000 years ago without calling it friction. He said, "We must design our lives so that the right choice is the easiest choice. That we must build our environment as if we were architects of our own destiny," because he understood something fundamental. Willpower is a finite resource that gets depleted. But your environment is an infinite resource that works for you even while you sleep, even when you're tired, even when you have no motivation. Think about this. If your phone is next to your bed when you wake up, you've already lost. It doesn't matter how disciplined you think you are. It doesn't matter how much you promise yourself that this time you won't check it the moment you open your eyes. Your brain will win that battle 99 times out of 100, because friction is zero. The phone is there, 5 centimeters from your hand, and your brain is wired to seek the path of least resistance. That's not weakness. That's biology. That's survival. Your brain is optimized to conserve energy, and the most efficient way to conserve energy is to do what is easiest. But if your phone is in another room, inside a drawer, with airplane mode on, you've just added 3 layers of friction. Now, to check Instagram, you have to get out of bed, walk to another room, open a drawer, turn off airplane mode, and only then can you fall into the destructive habit. And in those 30 seconds of friction, your brain has time to think, time to remember who you decided to be, time to choose differently. Friction gives you space to be conscious, and consciousness is where your real power lives. Marcus Aurelius ran an empire. He made decisions that affected millions of people. He dealt with wars, famines, betrayals, plague, and still he found time every night to write his meditations. How? Because he designed his environment so that writing was inevitable. He kept his journal in the same place, at the same time, under the same conditions. He removed all friction from that sacred habit. And he added maximum friction to the distractions that could have pulled him away from it. He didn't leave discipline to chance. He engineered it into his environment. Now look at your life. Where is the friction? If you want to go to the gym, but your gym is 45 minutes from your house, you've added massive friction to a habit you want to build. You'll go once, twice, 3 times if you're very motivated, but motivation runs out. And when it does, those 45 minutes there and 45 back will feel like an impossible mountain to climb. Friction will win. It always wins when it's on the wrong side. But if you have weights at home, if your workout clothes are laid out the night before, if your routine is written down and visible, if you've removed every possible excuse, then friction is working in your favor. The easiest option is to exercise, and when the easiest option is the right option, you don't need superhuman discipline. You just follow the path of least resistance that you intelligently designed for yourself. Seneca wrote about this in his letters. He said, "We should move away from temptations instead of trying to resist them. That a wise person does not test their virtue unnecessarily. He doesn't sit in front of a feast and try to resist eating. He simply doesn't go to the feast. He doesn't fill his house with food he doesn't want to eat and then battle his will. He simply doesn't buy that food. He adds friction where friction is needed. He removes friction where it isn't. This is intentional life design, not constant heroism. Because here is the brutal truth. You are not special. You do not have unlimited willpower. No one does. Neuroscience shows this again and again. Willpower depletes like a muscle, and when it's depleted, you fall back to your default habits. You fall back to what your environment makes easiest. That's why people surrounded by junk food eat junk food. Not because they're weak, because they're human. And humans do what their environment makes easy. This isn't an excuse. It's a biological fact you can use in your favor or let be used against you. Roy Baumeister, the psychologist who studied willpower for decades, discovered something fascinating. The people who seem to have the most self-control are not the ones who resist temptation the most. They are the ones who structure their lives to face fewer temptations. They are better at designing their environment than resisting impulses. They understand that every act of resistance consumes valuable mental resources, and they prefer to spend those resources on what matters instead of daily battles with their refrigerator. Think about all the decisions you make in a day just because your environment isn't optimized. Should I eat this or that? Should I check my phone or work? Should I watch another episode or go to sleep? Each of those micro decisions burns mental energy, and by the time it's time to do something that actually matters, you've already spent your decision tank on trivialities. Psychologists call this decision fatigue, and it's the silent enemy of every ambitious person. Steve Jobs wore the same outfit every day, not because he was poor or didn't care about his appearance, but because he understood that every decision about what to wear was one less decision he could use to build Apple. He removed friction from trivial decisions to reserve mental resources for important ones. Barack Obama did the same as president. Only gray or blue suits, zero wardrobe decisions, all his decision energy reserved for running a country. So here is your practical task for this lesson, and it's the most tangible one so far. You're going to make 2 lists. First list, 3 good habits you want to build. Second list, 3 bad habits you want to destroy. And for each one, you're going to ask, where is the friction? For the good habits, you're going to remove all possible friction. If you want to read more, the book goes next to your bed, open to the page where you left off. If you want to eat healthy, healthy food is prepared and visible. If you want to meditate, your meditation space is ready before you need it. 0 excuses, 0 extra steps, 0 friction. And for the bad habits, you're going to add friction everywhere. If you waste time on social media, uninstall the apps. Don't just log out, uninstall them. Make it require conscious effort to reinstall them every time you want to use them. If you eat snacks you don't want to eat, don't buy them. Don't trust your future discipline not to eat them when they're in your house. Just don't have them. If you procrastinate by watching shows, unplug the TV and put it in a closet. Make it take 10 minutes of effort before you can watch anything. In those 10 minutes, your brain will reconsider whether it really wants to do that, or if it's just an automatic impulse. This is not abstract theory. This is behavioral engineering, and it works because it works with your human nature instead of fighting against it. You're not trying to be a superhero with infinite discipline. You're being a smart architect who designs life so that good decisions are the easy decisions. And when good decisions are easy, you stop needing motivation. You stop needing inspiration. You just follow the path you already built. Epictetus taught his students that we are like actors in a play. We don't choose the role. We don't write the script. But we can choose how we perform our role within the circumstances we're given. And part of performing that role well is designing the stage in your favor, placing the props where you need them, removing the distractions that pull you out of character, creating an environment where being your best self is the default option. Look at your digital environment too. How many apps do you have on your phone that you don't use, but that constantly send notifications begging for your attention? Every notification is an interruption. Every interruption breaks your concentration. And, according to studies from the University of California, it takes an average of 23 minutes to return to deep focus after an interruption. So if your phone interrupts you every hour, you never reach real concentration. You never do deep work. You just skim the surface of your capacity. The Stoics understood this without smartphones. They spoke about protecting your attention as if it were your most valuable possession, because it is. Your attention is the only thing that is truly yours. It's where you live, and if you don't control where your attention goes, your life goes there without you consciously directing it. You end up living in response to other people's demands instead of in service of your own goals. Friction is power, but only if you use it intelligently. Most people have friction completely backwards. They make bad habits easy and good habits hard, and then they wonder why they can't change. They blame themselves for not having enough discipline, when the real problem isn't discipline, it's design. It's the architecture of their daily life. And that's something you can change today without needing more motivation or more willpower. Here is the capture moment of this lesson. You don't need more discipline. You need less friction between you and your good habits, and more friction between you and your bad habits. Because at the end of the day, we are all water flowing down the path of least resistance. The question isn't whether you will flow, it's where you've designed the path to flow. And that design is your responsibility, not your willpower, not your motivation, your strategic intelligence in building your environment. Do this right now. Identify the bad habit that's hardest for you, the one that comes back again and again, no matter how many times you promise to stop it, and add 3 layers of friction to it. If it's checking social media, uninstall the apps, change your password to something long you have to look up every time, and set a 30-second delay before you can access it. If it's eating poorly, don't keep that food in your house. Make it require going out to buy it. Make it require conscious effort. If it's staying up watching shows, unplug the TV and put it somewhere that takes 10 minutes of effort to get out. And for the good habit you most want to build, remove all friction. If it's working out, sleep in your workout clothes if you have to. If it's eating well, prep all your meals on Sunday for the week. If it's working on your important project, have your workspace ready before you sit down. Close all unrelated tabs. Put your phone in another room. Remove every possible excuse not to start. Leave nothing to chance. Don't trust your future motivation. Design for your mediocrity. And be surprised when your designed mediocrity produces extraordinary results. 4th Stoic lesson. The real cost of delaying grows exponentially. Every day you say, Tomorrow isn't just a lost day. It's a day that multiplies the cost of starting. This is a truth no one wants to see because seeing it hurts too much. We prefer to believe that a lost day is just a lost day, that we can make it up tomorrow. That time is neutral, and every day weighs the same. But that's a lie we tell ourselves to feel better about our inaction. Seneca wrote that procrastination is the thief of time, but it's worse than that. It's the thief of momentum, the thief of identity, the thief of possibility itself. Because the longer you wait, the harder it becomes to start. Not because of external circumstances, because of internal ones, because of what happens to your mind and your body when time passes without action. Think of it like this. The first day you skip the gym after going regularly is easy to recover from. Your body still has muscle memory. Your routine is still fresh. Your identity as someone who goes to the gym is still intact. You can go back tomorrow and it's almost like nothing happened. But after a week, your body has already started to change. After a month, your routine is forgotten. After 3 months, your identity has changed. You're no longer someone who temporarily stopped going to the gym. You're someone who doesn't go to the gym. Do you see the difference? The cost of returning is no longer just showing up once. It's rebuilding an entire identity. Marcus Aurelius understood this deeply. He wrote, "Do not let the future disturb you. You will meet it, if you have to, with the same weapons of reason you use today against the present." But he also knew that if you don't use those weapons today, they rust tomorrow. That every day of inaction weakens your capacity to act. That procrastination is not neutral, it is actively destructive. It's like a disease that becomes more aggressive the longer you ignore it. Psychologists call this the procrastination spiral. It works like this. You put off something you know you should do. That creates guilt. Guilt makes the thought of doing that thing even more uncomfortable. So, you postpone it again to avoid the discomfort, which creates more guilt, which makes the task even more uncomfortable, and so on, until the task becomes emotionally impossible to face. Not because it's objectively difficult, but because you've loaded so much negative emotion onto it that your brain now sees it as a threat. And here's what's most perverse. The longer you postpone something, the more justifications your brain creates to keep postponing it. At first you say, "I'll do it tomorrow because today I'm tired." After a week you say, "So much time has passed that I should wait for the perfect moment to start properly." After a month you say, "It's probably too late anyway. What's the point of starting now?" Your brain becomes incredibly creative at justifying inaction, because justifying is easier than acting. Seneca had students who came to him saying, "I'll start living philosophically when I retire, when I have more time, when circumstances are better." And, he replied with something brutal, "You are planning to live. Meanwhile, life is passing you by. There is no perfect moment. There is no magical tomorrow when everything aligns and you finally have the energy and clarity and time. That tomorrow is an illusion, and while you wait for it, your real capacity to change is being eroded day by day. Because here's the part no one explains. Every day of procrastination doesn't just move you further from your goal. It changes you as a person. It slowly turns you into someone who doesn't act, someone who promises and doesn't deliver, someone who knows what they should do but doesn't do it. And that identity, once it solidifies, is almost impossible to break, because then you're no longer fighting a habit, you're fighting who you believe you are. Neuroplasticity studies confirm this. Your brain literally rewires itself based on your repeated actions. If you spend 30 days postponing something important, you have created and reinforced neural pathways of procrastination. You have trained your brain to feel comfortable with inaction. You have made postponing your default response. And undoing that requires far more effort than simply having acted in the first place. It's like financial debt with compound interest. The first day you don't pay, you owe the principal plus a little interest. But if you keep not paying, you start owing interest on the interest. And eventually, the debt grows so fast, it becomes almost impossible to catch up. Procrastination works exactly the same way. On day one, the cost is low. But each additional day adds emotional and psychological interest. Guilt on top of guilt. Discomfort on top of discomfort. Erosion of identity on top of erosion of identity. Until the original task, which might have taken an hour, now carries so much emotional weight that it feels like an impossible mountain. There's a famous psychology experiment where students were asked to complete a simple task, write a 2-page essay. Half had to submit it in a week, the other half in a month. Guess which group reported more anxiety? It wasn't the group with less time, it was the group with more time, because they had more days to procrastinate, more days to feel guilty, more days for the essay to grow in their minds from a simple task into an emotional monster. The extra time didn't help them, it destroyed them, because more time means more opportunity to procrastinate. And more procrastination means more compounded cost. Marcus Aurelius faced this constantly. He carried the responsibility of an entire empire on his shoulders. It would have been easy to postpone hard decisions, to wait for more information, to wait for the perfect moment. But he understood that postponing a decision is itself a decision. It's deciding that the consequences of inaction are acceptable, and often those consequences are worse than any outcome of acting imperfectly, but immediately. In war, a mediocre decision executed today is worth more than a perfect decision executed too late. Think about relationships. Someone does something that bothers you. It's small, not a big deal. You decide not to say anything because you don't want to create conflict. Then they do it again, and again, and again. And each time it becomes harder to speak up, because now you're not just talking about what happened today, but about all the times before that you let slide. Resentment compounds like interest, until one day you explode over something that seems trivial. But it's not trivial. It's the drop that overflowed months or years of unsaid things. If you had spoken up the first time, it would have been a 5-minute uncomfortable conversation. Now it's potentially the end of the relationship. That's the exponential cost of postponing. Or think about health. The first day you notice something strange in your body, it's easy to go to the doctor. It's probably nothing, quick to check, easy to treat if it's something. But you postpone. Because you're busy, because you're afraid, because it's uncomfortable. Weeks pass, months pass. Now what could have been simple is complicated. What could have been resolved with a pill now requires surgery, or worse. The cost of postponing wasn't just time, it was health, it was potentially years of life. All because the first step was uncomfortable. Entrepreneurs understand this viscerally. In business, the cost of postponing a decision can be measured in real money. Every day you don't launch your product is a day your competition can launch first. Every day you don't fix a problem with a client is a day closer to losing that client. Every day you don't invest in improving your systems is a day you operate with inefficiency that compounds. That's why the companies that win are the ones that move fast. Not perfectly, fast, because they understand that speed of implementation beats perfection of planning. So here is your practical action. Think about the thing you've been postponing the longest. That thing you know you should do, but have been avoiding for weeks, months, or even years. Now ask yourself honestly, how much harder is it to start today compared to when you first thought about it? How much guilt have you accumulated? How big has the monster grown in your mind? Because that growth, that exponential accumulation of internal resistance, is what procrastination really costs you. And the only way to stop that accumulation is to break the pattern today, not tomorrow. Today. Because tomorrow, the compound interest keeps growing. Tomorrow will be harder than today. And the day after tomorrow will be harder than tomorrow. This is an equation that only moves in one direction unless you interrupt it with action, with movement, with doing something, anything, right now. Epictetus taught that we don't control what happens to us, but we absolutely control our responses. And postponing is a response. It's choosing future discomfort to avoid present discomfort. It's betting that your future self will be more capable of handling what your present self is avoiding. But, as we've seen, that future self is a stranger. And that stranger inherits not only the original task, but all the emotional weight you've been piling onto it. Seneca had a phrase that should terrify you: all of life is postponement. He didn't say it as a neutral fact, he said it as a warning, as a wake-up call. Because most people live their entire lives postponing what matters, postponing the hard conversation until the relationship dies, postponing the career change until it's too late, postponing living until there's no life left to live, all because they didn't understand that the cost of delaying grows exponentially with every day they let pass. Here is the capture moment. Every day you postpone, you are not staying in the same place. You are falling backward. Because the cost of starting tomorrow is always higher than the cost of starting today. And that cost doesn't grow linearly. It grows exponentially, like a snowball rolling downhill. Every moment of inaction makes it bigger, heavier, harder to stop. The only way to stop that snowball is to never let it start rolling. And if it's already rolling, the only way to minimize the damage is to stop it now, not tomorrow, now. Because tomorrow it will be bigger, and the day after, it will be unstoppable. Do this. Take the thing you've been postponing, that conversation, that project, that decision, and make it as small as possible. You don't need to do everything. You just need to take the smallest first step you can imagine. If it's writing a book, don't write the book. Write a paragraph. If it's starting a business, don't start the business. Make one call. If it's fixing a relationship, don't fix the whole relationship. Send one message. The goal isn't to complete the task. The goal is to stop the compound interest of procrastination. To show your brain that this thing isn't as big as you've made it in your mind. To break the inertia of inaction. Because inertia works both ways. An object at rest tends to stay at rest, but an object in motion tends to stay in motion. And the hardest step is always the first. So take that step today, now. Because every moment you wait is a moment the cost keeps growing exponentially. Fifth Stoic lesson: your body determines your mental capacity. Marcus Aurelius understood that the body is not optional when it comes to mental performance. These words were written by a man who led battles, made life or death decisions, and reflected on the nature of the universe. And yet, or precisely because of that, he knew that if his body failed, his mind failed with it. There is no separation. You are not a brain driving a body like a vehicle. You are an integrated whole where every part affects every other part. If you're sleeping 4 hours, eating junk, and never moving your body, your brain is literally operating at 60% of its capacity. This is not metaphor. It's not exaggeration. Neuroscience studies show this beyond doubt. When you're sleep deprived, your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for decision-making and self-control, partially shuts down. It's like trying to run complex software on a computer with half the RAM. It will be slow, it will make mistakes, it will crash. And yet you look around and see people trying to build empires while systematically abusing their bodies. They sleep 5 hours because sleep is for the weak. They eat whatever is fastest because there's no time to cook properly. They never exercise because they're too busy building something important. And then they wonder why they can't focus, why they make bad decisions, why they feel anxious and depressed and drained. Seneca wrote extensively about this. He said the body is the instrument of the soul, and an instrument that isn't maintained cannot produce good music. He practiced what he preached. He exercised regularly. He practiced restraint with food. He bathed in cold water to strengthen his body, not out of vanity, but because he understood that his ability to think clearly depended directly on the state of his body, that he could not be an effective philosopher in a neglected body. Think about your typical day. You wake up after sleeping poorly. You skip breakfast or eat something fast loaded with sugar. You sit in front of a screen for 8 hours. You eat more fast food for lunch, more hours sitting. You get home mentally exhausted without having moved your body at all. You eat late. You watch TV until midnight. You sleep poorly again. And you repeat this cycle day after day, wondering why you feel terrible, why you can't focus, why you're always tired but never truly rested. Your body was not designed for this. You were designed to move, to run, to lift things, to spend time in the sun, to sleep when it gets dark and wake when it gets light, to eat real food that comes from the earth and from animals, not to sit 14 hours a day under artificial light eating processed products engineered in labs to be addictive. And every day you live like this, you're borrowing energy from your future. You're burning your health capital to pay for the demands of the present. And eventually, that loan gets collected with devastating interest. Sleep is perhaps the clearest example. Matthew Walker, a neuroscientist who has devoted his career to studying sleep, says something terrifying. There is not a single system in your body that doesn't benefit from sleep or that isn't harmed by the lack of it. Your immune system, your hormonal regulation, your metabolism, your memory, your decision-making capacity, your emotional regulation, everything depends on sleep. And yet we live in a culture that glorifies sleeping little, that treats sleep like a weakness, like something only unambitious people do. But the data doesn't lie. If you consistently sleep less than 7 hours, your risk of Alzheimer's increases dramatically. Your risk of cardiovascular disease skyrockets. Your ability to regulate glucose deteriorates, potentially leading to diabetes. Your immune system weakens, making you more susceptible to everything from colds to cancer. And that's just the physical side. Mentally, sleep deprivation is literal torture. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that makes you human, that allows you to plan, reason, and regulate yourself, shuts down. You are literally operating as a diminished version of yourself. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "It is a disgrace for a superior soul to be defeated by an inferior body." He knew this because he himself dealt with constant health problems. He likely suffered from chronic stomach ulcers. He lived in pain, and yet he maintained discipline over what he could control: his diet, his exercise, his sleep, when possible, because he understood that every concession he made to his body was a concession he made to his ability to fulfill his purpose. So here's the brutal question: what are you leaving on the table? How much money are you not making because your brain can't think clearly? How much creativity are you losing because your body is constantly in survival mode? How many relationships are you damaging because you're irritable and anxious from lack of sleep and poor nutrition? How many opportunities are you missing because you don't have the energy to take them? The most successful people in the world understand this. It's no coincidence that the CEOs of the largest companies wake up early to exercise. It's no coincidence that they invest time and money in optimizing their sleep. It's no coincidence that they're obsessive about what they eat. It's not vanity, it's strategy. It's understanding that they are their most valuable tool. And a poorly maintained tool is a useless tool. Jeff Bezos sleeps 8 hours every night, not because he's lazy, because he understands that the billion-dollar decisions he makes require his brain to function optimally, and his brain cannot function optimally without adequate sleep. Exercise is just as critical, and not for the superficial reasons people think. Yes, it makes you look better. Yes, it makes you healthier. But more important for someone ambitious, exercise is the only known method for creating new neurons in the adult brain. It's called neurogenesis. When you do cardiovascular exercise, your brain releases a protein called BDNF that acts like fertilizer for your neurons. You are literally making your brain more capable of learning, remembering, and forming new connections. Not exercising isn't just neglecting your body, it's actively neglecting your cognitive capacity. And nutrition is where most people unknowingly sabotage themselves. Your brain is 2% of your body weight, but uses 20% of your energy. It requires specific fuel. When you eat sugar, your glucose spikes and then crashes. And when it crashes, your ability to focus crashes with it. When you don't eat enough protein, your brain can't manufacture the neurotransmitters it needs to function. When you're dehydrated, even slightly, your cognitive performance drops by up to 30%. These are not small details. These are variables that determine whether you can think clearly or not, whether you can make good decisions or not, whether you can execute your plans or not. Epictetus taught this to his students constantly. He said we should care for our bodies with discipline, but without obsession, that the body is the vehicle we use to practice virtue, and that a broken vehicle severely limits how far we can go. He himself lived with a damaged leg. He knew the cost of having a body that doesn't function optimally. That's why he was even more careful with what he could control. Your practical task is to build what I call the performance triangle. 3 non-negotiable pillars. First pillar, movement. Before you start your workday, move your body. You don't need 2 hours in the gym. You need 20 minutes of something that gets your blood flowing. That activates your nervous system. That reminds your body it's alive and capable. It can be running, it can be yoga, it can be lifting weights, it can be a fast walk, but it has to be every day. No exceptions. Because every day you don't move your body, you start the day with your brain operating at 80% capacity. Second pillar, fuel. Stop eating randomly. A lot of people say they have no energy when what they really mean is, I haven't eaten real protein in 2 days and I'm dehydrated. Your brain needs specific fuel, protein to rebuild, healthy fats to function, complex carbohydrates for sustained energy, water for everything. If the only thing you changed was drinking 2 liters of water a day and eating 30 grams of protein at each meal, you would see a dramatic difference in your mental clarity within a week. Third pillar, recovery. Sleep is non-negotiable. It's not for the weak. It's for people who want their brains to function. You need 7 to 8 hours, and not just any 7 hours. You need quality sleep. In a dark room, no screens an hour before bed, a cool temperature. If you're not prioritizing your sleep, you're sabotaging everything else you're trying to achieve. Because a brain without proper sleep is a brain that makes bad decisions, that can't regulate emotions, that can't learn or remember effectively. Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations at night after brutal days. How did he have the mental clarity to philosophize after running a war-torn empire? Because he took meticulous care of his body. He trained. He ate with discipline. He slept when he could. He didn't let external demands become an excuse to neglect his internal instrument. And that care is what allowed him to produce some of the deepest philosophical reflections in human history under the most stressful circumstances imaginable. Here's your capture moment. Your energy level determines your income level. Your mental clarity determines your decision quality. And both are completely determined by how you treat your body. Not tomorrow. Today. In the next 24 hours. Because you can have the best strategy in the world, but if your body can't execute it, that strategy is worthless. You are your most valuable tool. Start treating yourself like one. And don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying you need to be perfect. I'm not saying you need to sleep 9 hours, train 2 hours a day, and eat like an Olympic athlete. I'm saying you need to recognize the direct connection between your body and your capacity to achieve anything you want to achieve. I'm saying that every concession you make in your health is a concession you make in your potential, and eventually those concessions add up until you're operating nowhere near your real capacity. Start small if you need to start small, but start. Move your body for 20 minutes tomorrow before work. Eat 30 grams of protein for breakfast. Drink 2 liters of water. Sleep 7 hours. Just those 4 things. Do them consistently for 2 weeks. You don't need to believe me. Just do it and watch what happens to your energy, to your clarity, to your ability to execute. The results will speak louder than any argument I could make. Your body is the platform on which you build everything else. Invest in that platform, or accept that everything you build on a weak foundation will eventually collapse. Sixth Stoic lesson. The 2-day rule kills momentum. The Stoics knew that consistency beats talent. This isn't a hollow motivational phrase. It's a mathematical truth about how human change actually works. You can have a bad day. You can skip a workout. You can break your diet once. We all do. We all fall. But never let it become 2 in a row. Because 2 becomes 3. 3 becomes a week. And a week becomes quitting altogether. This is perhaps the simplest and most powerful lesson of all, and most people completely ignore it because they think one day doesn't matter, that they can make it up tomorrow, that it's just a small slip. But they don't understand how momentum works. They don't understand that they're playing with fire, because momentum is the only thing that keeps you moving when motivation runs out. And motivation always runs out. Marcus Aurelius understood this deeply. He wrote, "When you rise in the morning, think of what a privilege it is to be alive, to think, to enjoy, to love." But he also knew that some days he didn't want to get up. Some days the weight of the empire was too much. Some days he just wanted to quit. And on those days, what saved him wasn't motivation. It was the momentum he had built day after day by not failing twice in a row. Think about how this really works. The first day you break your streak, your identity is still intact. You're still someone who does that thing. You just had a bad day. Your brain still sees you as a disciplined person who had an exception. But the second consecutive day, something changes. It's no longer an exception. It's a pattern. And your brain is a pattern recognition machine. 2 data points are enough for it to start drawing a line. And that line points away from who you want to be. Habit formation studies confirm this. There's something psychologists call the abstinence violation effect. It works like this. When you break a habit once, your brain still holds on to the identity. When you break it 2 days in a row, your brain starts to question the identity. And when you break it 3 days in a row, your brain has already decided that this isn't who you really are. Now you're fighting your own psychology. You're trying to convince your brain that you're someone your recent actions say you're not. Seneca had students who came to him saying, "I failed yesterday. I've ruined everything. What's the point of continuing?" And he answered with something that changed everything. If you fall into the mud, do you stay there rolling around because you're already dirty? Or do you get up and clean yourself before the mud dries and becomes harder to remove? One bad day doesn't ruin anything. 2 bad days in a row start to create a problem. 3 bad days in a row, and you have an identity crisis. The 2-day rule is simple, but it requires constant vigilance, not perfection. No one can be perfect, but it does require that you never let one slip turn into 2. It requires that the day after you fail becomes your most important day, not the day you started, not the day you felt most motivated, the day after you failed. Because that day determines whether you have a habit with an occasional exception or a pattern of failing. Think about it in terms of identity. If you go to the gym 30 days in a row and then miss 1 day, you're still someone who goes to the gym. Your identity is intact. But if you miss 2 days in a row, you're no longer asking why you missed. You're starting to ask whether you're really someone who goes to the gym. See the difference? 1 day is an event. 2 days is the beginning of a pattern, and patterns define who you are. Epictetus taught his students about the concept of PROCRASTINATE, which means constant attention. He said we must remain continually vigilant about our actions, not in an anxious or neurotic way, but in a conscious way, knowing that every action is a vote for the kind of person we want to be. And 2 consecutive votes in the wrong direction start to change the outcome. Here's what most people don't understand. Momentum isn't something you either have or don't have. It's something you build drop by drop, day by day. And it's destroyed the same way. It isn't destroyed by 1 bad day. It's destroyed by 2 bad days in a row, because 2 consecutive days tell your brain, This isn't important anymore. This isn't who I am anymore. This was something I was trying out, and clearly it didn't stick. Elite athletes understand this intuitively. They aren't perfect. They have days when training is terrible, days when they can't lift their normal weights, days when everything hurts and nothing works. But they never, ever have 2 bad days in a row without doing something, because they understand that the day after a bad day is where careers are defined, not the day they felt invincible, the day after they felt terrible. Your practical task for this lesson is to implement a simple tracking system, not a complicated app, not an elaborate journal, something so simple you can't fail to use it. A calendar on your wall. A red X for every day you complete your most important habit. A chain of red X's that grows day after day, and your only job is not to break the chain. Jerry Seinfeld used this method to write jokes every day. Not to write good jokes, just to write. And he became one of the most successful comedians in history, not by being the most talented, by being the most consistent. But here's the crucial part. When you break the chain, and you will, your only goal is to not leave a blank space the next day. Mark an X that next day, even if it's the bare minimum. If your habit is running 5 kilometers and you failed yesterday, today you run 1. If your habit is writing 1,000 words and you failed yesterday, today you write 100. You're not trying to make up for what you lost. You're trying to protect your identity. You're voting for who you are. And that vote matters more than all the perfect days you had before. Marcus Aurelius faced this constantly. There were days, probably weeks, when the demands of the empire made it impossible to keep his written meditation practice. Battles, crises, betrayals. Days when simply surviving was already an achievement. But he always came back. He never let it become 2. He never let the exception become the rule, and that's why we have the meditations. That's why his wisdom has survived 2,000 years, not because he was perfect, because he never let 1 bad day become 2. There's something psychologists call identity elasticity. Your identity can stretch a little. It can tolerate occasional exceptions. It can survive imperfect days, but it has a breaking point. And that breaking point is usually the 2nd consecutive day. After that, you're in dangerous territory. You're borrowing against your future identity, and eventually that debt gets collected. Think about all the things you started and abandoned. You didn't abandon them the first day you failed. You abandoned them when you let that first day become 2. When you let 2 become 3. When the exception became so common, it turned into the rule. And then one day you woke up and you were no longer someone who did that thing. You were no longer someone with that habit. You were no longer that version of yourself you wanted to be. Seneca wrote, "It is not because things are difficult that we do not dare. It is because we do not dare that things are difficult." And part of daring is daring to come back after you fail. It's daring to not let 1 bad day define your trajectory. It's daring to protect your momentum as if it were the most valuable thing you have, because it is. Momentum is the difference between someone who tries to change and someone who changes, between someone who has goals and someone who achieves goals, between someone who dreams and someone who builds. And here's something most people never consider. Momentum doesn't just affect your actions, it affects your perception. When you have momentum, obstacles look smaller, problems look solvable, resistance looks manageable. But when you lose momentum, everything gets heavier. The same obstacles you used to step over now look like mountains. The same problems you used to solve now look impossible. It's not that the circumstances changed, your momentum changed, and your momentum is your lens. Neuroscientists study this under the concept of perceived self-efficacy. It's basically your belief in your ability to get things done. And that belief doesn't come from positive affirmations or visualization. It comes from evidence, from prior action, from accumulated results. Every day you follow through is evidence to your brain that you're capable. Every day you fail is evidence that you're not. And 2 consecutive days of negative evidence start to change your core belief about yourself. That's why watching elite athletes is so instructive. Roger Federer didn't become the greatest tennis player in the world by having perfect winning streaks. He became the greatest because when he lost a match, he never lost 2 in a row. When he had a bad set, he never had 2 bad sets in a row. He understood that momentum is more important than perfection. That consistent mediocrity beats peaks of brilliance with valleys of collapse, because momentum compounds and valleys destroy it. Think about your own life. How many times have you started something with enthusiasm, failed once, told yourself you'd pick it up tomorrow, failed again, and suddenly 3 months have passed and you barely remember why it mattered? You didn't lose interest. You lost momentum. And once momentum is gone, starting again requires so much energy that your brain prefers to just forget about it. It prefers to redefine you as someone who no longer does that thing rather than rebuild from zero. Marcus Aurelius had a devastating line about this. You will very soon be dead, and you have not yet been simple or free from disturbance. He understood that time is limited, and that every day we let slip is a day we never get back. But more importantly, he understood that every day we let slip makes the next day harder. That the cost of postponing isn't linear, it's exponential, and that protecting your daily momentum is the only way to build anything meaningful before time runs out. So, implement this tomorrow. Identify your most important habit, the one that, if done consistently, would change your life in 6 months. And commit to the 2-day rule. Don't commit to doing it perfectly. Don't commit to doing it at the same time. Don't commit to doing it with the same intensity. Commit to never letting 2 days in a row pass without doing it. That's your only commitment. And watch how that simple rule transforms everything. Because here's the magic. When you know you can't fail 2 days in a row, the day after you fail becomes sacred. It becomes non-negotiable, and suddenly you find a way. Suddenly you find the time. Suddenly you find the energy. Not because it magically appeared, but because you finally have clarity about what actually matters. Because you finally understand that that day is where everything is decided. Not the day you felt inspired, the day after you felt defeated. Here's the capture moment. 1 bad day is an event. 2 bad days in a row is a pattern, and patterns become identity. Protect your momentum as if your life depended on it. Because your life, the life you want to live, literally depends on it. Never fail 2 days in a row. That's the rule. Simple, brutal, effective. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to not be consistently imperfect. And the difference between those two is the day after you fail. That day is where winners separate from the ones who almost made it. 7th Stoic lesson. Without real consequences, there is no real commitment. Your brain avoids pain more than it seeks pleasure. This isn't philosophy, it's neuroscience, it's biology. It's how you're wired at an evolutionary level. And as long as you don't understand this and use it in your favor, you'll keep making promises you don't keep. You'll keep being the person with big intentions and zero results. Epictetus taught that you have to create pain for inaction, because if there are no real consequences for not acting, sooner or later you will loosen up. It's simply human nature. And today, we live too comfortably. We can postpone without anything terrible happening. We can skip the gym and stay alive. We can not work on our project and still eat. We can avoid hard conversations and stay in the relationship. There is no immediate pain, and without immediate pain, there is no urgency, and without urgency, there is no action. Think about the things you actually do versus the things you say you're going to do. What's the difference? The things you actually do have real consequences if you don't do them. If you don't pay your rent, you lose your home. If you don't go to work, you lose your job. If you don't eat, you starve. The consequences are immediate, tangible, and painful. That's why you do them, not because you're disciplined, because the consequences force you. But the things you say you're going to do, the important goals, the big dreams, those don't have immediate consequences. You cannot write your book today and nothing happens. You cannot start your business today and life goes on exactly the same. You can avoid that hard conversation today and everything appears fine. The consequences, if they exist at all, are distant, abstract, easy to ignore. That's why you don't do them. Not because they aren't important, because your brain doesn't treat them as urgent. Marcus Aurelius understood this deeply. He wrote, "Our actions may be impeded, but there can be no impediment to our intentions or our dispositions." But he also knew that intentions without consequences are just fantasies. That's why he wrote to himself. That's why he created accountability with his teachers and advisors. That's why he set public standards for his behavior. He didn't trust his intentions. He trusted systems that created real pain when he failed. When I was building my business, my team and I set a goal to reach 1 million euros in monthly revenue by a specific date, and to make sure we were serious, we turned it into a bet with real consequences. If we didn't hit it, there was a consequence. Something real, something painful, something public. What happened? Everything changed. Every meeting mattered. Every decision counted. Every day was either progress or an excuse. Because now there was skin in the game. Something real was on the line. Skin in the game is a concept from the trader and philosopher Nassim Nicholas Taleb. It means you have something to lose, that you're not playing with plastic chips but with real money, that your words have consequences that affect you directly. And when you have skin in the game, all your behavior changes. Because now the cost of failing isn't abstract. It's concrete. It's personal. It's immediate. Seneca practiced this regularly. He made public vows about his behavior. He committed in front of others to specific standards. And he knew that failing those public commitments would carry a social cost, a reputational cost, a cost to his integrity. It wasn't masochism, it was behavioral engineering. It was creating conditions where his best option was to follow through, where the pain of failing was greater than the pain of acting. Here's how you can apply this. First tactic: bet real money, not symbolic, real. If you don't follow your training plan this week, you send 50 euros to a friend, and you tell them explicitly they're not allowed to give it back. The pain doesn't have to be huge, it has to be real. It has to be enough that your brain prefers doing the work to losing the money. And what's fascinating is that you'll probably never have to pay, because now that there are real consequences, you'll follow through. Second tactic, public accountability. Tell someone your goal, specific, with a date, and ask them to check in with you about it. Not to encourage you, not to tell you that you can do it. To ask you, without judgment, whether you did it or not. The pain of having to admit you didn't is enough for your brain to prefer doing it. It's not that you care what they think. It's that now there's a witness, and humans are tribal. We care about our reputation even when we know we shouldn't. Third tactic, tie rewards to others. Make your success benefit people you care about. When I was building my business, I told my team, if we hit this, we're all going on a trip. Suddenly, it wasn't just my goal. They were involved. They pushed me. They reminded me. They kept me accountable. Not because they were harsh, because now their reward depended on my consistency. I had created accountability without punishment. The Stoics called this the difference between wishes and decisions. A wish is something you'd like to happen. A decision is something you're going to make happen. And the difference between wishes and decisions is consequences. Wishes don't have consequences. Decisions do. If you wish to go to the gym, you might go or you might not. If you decide to go to the gym and create consequences for not going, you go. It's that simple. Epictetus was brutal about this. He said, don't say you want something, say you're going to do it, and then create the conditions where doing it is your only real option. He didn't believe in motivation. He believed in necessity. He believed in creating situations where the only way to avoid pain was to act, where postponing hurt more than doing the work, where inaction carried a price so high that your brain preferred anything over staying still. But there's an important balance here. This isn't about punishing yourself brutally. This isn't about creating so much fear that you freeze. It's about creating enough discomfort that action becomes the more attractive option. Think of it as adjusting the scale. Right now, inaction is comfortable and action is uncomfortable. You need to add weight to the inaction side until it becomes the less attractive option. Not so much that it crushes you, just enough to tip the scale. Marcus Aurelius faced real consequences every day. If he made a bad decision as emperor, people died. If he was weak, the empire fell. If he gave up, everything he'd worked for collapsed. He didn't need to create artificial consequences. The consequences were built into his role. But you and I aren't emperors. Our consequences aren't automatically obvious. We have to create them. We have to design our environment so that failing hurts enough for our brain to prefer succeeding. And here's something counterintuitive. The best consequences aren't massive punishments. They're small but consistent pains. Not, if I don't hit my goal this year, I lose everything. That paralyzes you. It's, if I don't do this today, I have to admit it to someone tomorrow. If I don't follow through this week, I lose 50 euros on Friday. Consequences big enough to matter, small enough not to terrify you. Seneca wrote about the difference between useful fears and paralyzing fears. Useful fears push you to act, paralyzing fears freeze you, and creating consequences is an art. Too small and you ignore them. Too big and you freeze. Just right, and they push you exactly where you need to go. It's like adjusting a thermostat. You experiment until you find the temperature where your brain says, okay, it's easier to do the work than to face this. There's a reason personal trainers work. It's not because they know secret exercises you don't. It's because they've created a consequence. If you don't show up, you lose your money. If you don't do the work, someone knows. That pressure, that accountability, that skin in the game is what turns intention into action. And you can create that same system for any area of your life without paying a trainer. You just need to understand the principle and apply it ruthlessly. Think about how real deadlines work versus the deadlines you set for yourself. A real deadline has consequences. If you don't deliver the project on time, you lose the client. If you don't pay the bill on time, your service gets cut. That's why you meet them. But the deadlines you set for yourself are fantasy. Nothing happens if you ignore them, so you ignore them. Over and over until they stop meaning anything. The solution is to turn your personal deadlines into real deadlines. How? By adding external consequences. You tell your partner, "If I don't have this done by Friday, you make the decision without me." You tell your friend, "If I don't finish this week, I give you €100. You post your commitment publicly with a specific date. Now, your personal deadline has real weight. Now there's something at stake beyond your intention, and that changes everything. The Stoics understood that humans are social animals, that we care about our reputation even when we rationally know we shouldn't care so much. And instead of fighting that reality, they used it. Marcus Aurelius wrote knowing that others would eventually read his thoughts. That created a standard. Epictetus taught publicly. That created accountability. Seneca published his letters. That created consequences for inconsistency. It wasn't vanity, it was behavioral engineering. So here's your 3-level accountability system. Level 1, private accountability. You with yourself. A journal where you record your commitments and your results. Brutal honesty. No one sees it but you see it. And that creates a first layer of consequence. The consequence of not being able to lie to yourself about whether you're following through. Level 2, selective accountability. One person you trust who checks in with you weekly. Not your partner, not your family. Someone who doesn't have an emotional interest in making you feel better. Someone who will ask you directly, did you do it or not? No judgment, no advice, just the question, and you answer, yes or no. That moment of having to admit you didn't do it creates enough discomfort that your brain prefers to do it next week. Level 3, public accountability. This is the most powerful and the most terrifying. You publicly declare your commitment with a date, with specificity, and you publicly update your progress. Not to brag when you're doing well, so people can see when you're not following through. That social pressure, even when you rationally know most people don't care, is enough to make your brain do whatever it takes to follow through. Not because you're weak, because you're human, and humans respond to social consequences. Here's the capture moment. Without skin in the game, there is no commitment. Without commitment, there are no results. Stop playing with plastic chips. Put something real on the line. Make failure painful enough that success becomes your only real option, not because you're a masochist, because you understand how your brain works. Your brain avoids pain, so use that. Make inaction hurt more than action. And watch how all that discipline you thought you didn't have suddenly appears. It was never that you didn't have it. It was that you never created the conditions where using it was your best option. 8th Stoic lesson. Your procrastination reveals your true calling. What you do when no one is forcing you is the biggest clue to what you should actually be building. This truth sounds strange at first. because we've been trained to think that procrastination is bad, that it's the enemy, that we need to fight it and eliminate it. But what if I told you that your procrastination is trying to tell you something? What if it's a compass pointing toward your true north? Let me explain. We all procrastinate, but we don't procrastinate on everything. There are things you do without anyone forcing you, things where you lose track of time, things you do even when you're tired, even when you're not getting paid, even when no one is watching. Those things are your procrastination revealing your purpose. Because you're not procrastinating on those things, you're procrastinating toward those things. The Stoics believed in following your inner nature. Epictetus spoke about the daimon, that inner spirit that guides you toward what you're meant to do. Marcus Aurelius wrote about finding your ergon, your specific work in the world. They understood that every person has something they're naturally inclined to do, and that ignoring that inclination and forcing yourself to be something you're not is the recipe for a miserable life. When I was in university, I was supposed to study for exams. I was supposed to do assignments. I was supposed to follow the path everyone else was following, but I kept finding myself escaping to build businesses, to build funnels, to write copy, to reach out to brands. That was my procrastination. That was what I did when I avoided what I should have been doing. And that procrastination became my career. It became the skill set that makes me millions today. It wasn't an accident. It was my inner nature screaming that I was on the wrong path. My procrastination wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. It was my real self trying to come out, while my conditioned self was trying to force me into a mold that wasn't meant for me. And the only reason I eventually succeeded is because I finally listened. I finally paid attention to where my procrastination was pulling me instead of fighting it. Seneca wrote about this in a different way. He spoke about how most people live borrowed lives. They live their parents' dreams, society's expectations, paths others told them to follow. And then they wonder why they're miserable, why they feel empty, why they procrastinate so much. It's not because they're lazy, it's because they're doing the wrong work, and their procrastination is their soul resisting a life that isn't theirs. Here's your diagnostic task. For 1 week, track your procrastination, not your tasks, your procrastination. When you avoid working, what do you do instead? Don't tell me scrolling social media without intention. That's anesthesia. That's what you do to numb the pain of being in the wrong place. But underneath that anesthesia, what's there? What's the thing you do that makes you lose track of time? What's the thing you spend energy on voluntarily? For some people, it's researching products. For others, it's editing photos. For others, it's explaining things to friends. For others, it's fixing things. For others, it's writing. For others, it's organizing. For others, it's designing. That pattern is your zone of genius trying to come out. It's your inner nature trying to show you the path. And you're ignoring it because you were told you have to do something else, because you have to be responsible, because you have to follow the plan. Marcus Aurelius was an emperor, but his true passion was philosophy. He could have spent all his time in the role he was given. He could have ignored that inner voice, but he didn't. He found a way to integrate his philosophical nature into his role as emperor. He wrote at night. He reflected between battles. He didn't fight who he was. He found a way to be who he was within the circumstances he had. And that's why he's remembered not just as an emperor, but as one of the great philosophers in history. But here's the hard part. Once you identify that natural pull, you can't keep ignoring it. Now you know. And knowing makes you responsible. You can't say you don't know what to do anymore. You can't hide behind excuses. Now you have to decide, am I going to honor my nature, or am I going to keep living a borrowed life? Am I going to build around my procrastination, or keep fighting against it? Epictetus taught that every person has a role to play, but that role isn't imposed from the outside. It's discovered from within, and the way you discover it is by observing your natural inclinations, observing what you do without being paid, what you do if money weren't a factor, what you do that makes you feel alive even when you're exhausted. Those aren't distractions, they're signals. So here's the second step: give it structure. Once you identify that natural pull, stop treating it like a hobby. Treat it like a skill worth developing. Take a course, practice deliberately, find clients, and offer your skill. Start sharing what you're learning. Because here's the brutal truth: your procrastination won't magically turn into a career. You have to build the bridge between your natural inclination and a value offering, between what you love doing and what people need. And here's the third step: validate before you monetize. Before you try to charge for it, prove that people actually want it. Publish content about it. Help people for free. Build a small audience around your procrastination. Because when people start asking you, "How can I work with you?" you'll know you're on the right path. You'll know your procrastination wasn't just yours. It was your way of picking up on something the world needs. Seneca had students who came to him with constant resistance toward their jobs, and instead of telling them to be more disciplined, he asked them, "What would you do if you didn't have to do this? What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? What would you do if you already had all the money you needed?" Their answers revealed their true path. And then he helped them build the bridge to find a way to live from their nature instead of against it. But there's an important warning. Not everything you love doing can be easily monetized, and that's okay. Not everything has to be a career. Some things can just be for you. But even those things deserve space in your life. They deserve time. They deserve respect, because they're part of who you are. And if you ignore them completely because they don't produce money, you're killing a part of your soul. You're choosing survival over life. And that's a recipe for long-term depression. Marcus Aurelius didn't need to write philosophy to survive. He had an empire, he had wealth, he had power, but he wrote anyway because it was part of his nature. Because without it, he wasn't fully himself. And if he, with the responsibilities of an empire, could make space for his philosophical nature, you can make space for yours. It's not a lack of time, it's a lack of priority. It's a lack of courage to say, this also matters. This is also part of who I am. And here's the game-changing part. When you finally start honoring your procrastination instead of fighting it, when you start building your life around your natural inclinations instead of against them, something magical happens. Procrastination disappears, not because you became more disciplined, because you're finally doing what you were meant to do. And when you do what you were meant to do, you don't need discipline. You need breaks to stop yourself from doing too much. Epictetus had students who complained that they procrastinated on everything, and he asked them one simple question: what's the one thing you never procrastinate on? What do you do even when you're tired? What do you do even when you're not getting paid? What do you do even when no one is watching? That answer was their answer. That was the signal of their daimon, their inner spirit, showing them the path. They didn't need more discipline. They needed more honesty about who they really were. Seneca put it another way. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. And the way we waste the most time is by fighting our nature, by trying to be someone we're not, by following paths others designed for us. And our procrastination is our soul saying, "This is not your path. This is not your work. This is not for you." And the longer you ignore that signal, the more miserable you become. Not because you fail, but because even if you succeed on the wrong path, you arrive at a destination you never wanted. So here's your 3-step diagnosis. Step 1. Observe without judgment. For 2 weeks, simply notice where your procrastination takes you. Don't try to change it. Don't try to correct it. Just observe. What do you do when you avoid working? Where does your energy naturally go? Record the patterns without judging them as good or bad. Just observe. Step 2. Identify the pattern. After 2 weeks of observation, look for the common thread. It won't be obvious at first. Maybe you're always explaining things to others, or always organizing, or always creating something visual, or always solving logical problems, or always connecting people. That pattern is your zone of genius. It's your natural inclination. It's your procrastination revealing your purpose. Step 3. Experiment with structure. Once you've identified the pattern, give it real space, not as a hobby, as a serious experiment. Dedicate 5 hours this week to developing that skill intentionally, not to monetize immediately, to see what happens, to see if that natural energy turns into real competence when you give it structure, to see if what you casually love doing becomes what you love doing professionally when you give it the respect it deserves. And here's the part no one tells you. You don't have to burn everything down and start from zero. You don't have to quit your job tomorrow to follow your calling. You can build the bridge while you're still on the shore. You can explore your procrastination while you're still paying your bills. You can develop your zone of genius in the hours you're currently wasting fighting yourself. It's not either or. It's this while you build that. Marcus Aurelius didn't resign as emperor to become a philosopher. He found a way to be both. He integrated his philosophical nature into his imperial role, and that integration is what made him great at both. Not because he was perfect, because he was authentic, because he honored all parts of himself instead of sacrificing some for others. And you can do the same. You don't have to choose between responsibility and authenticity. You have to find a way to be both at the same time. Here's the capture moment. Your procrastination is not your enemy. It's your compass. Stop fighting it and start studying it. What you do when you avoid working is what you should be doing as work. Not in exactly the same way, but in that direction. With that energy, with that passion. Because when you finally align your work with your nature, procrastination disappears. Not because you became more disciplined, because you're finally doing what you were meant to do. And when you do what you were meant to do, you don't need discipline. You need breaks to stop yourself from doing too much. That's the difference between living your life and living someone else's life. And your procrastination has been trying to show you the way all along. 9th Stoic lesson. Perfection is the elegant excuse for cowardice. Marcus Aurelius ran an empire at war and didn't wait for a perfect plan for every battle. He made decisions with incomplete information. He acted with limited resources. He faced problems with no obvious solutions. And he acted anyway, because he understood something most people never grasp. Perfection isn't a standard. It's an excuse. It's the most sophisticated form of cowardice there is, because it lets you feel noble while you avoid real risk. Successful people don't wait until they feel ready. They move before they feel ready. They decide before they have all the information. They launch the product before it's perfect. They have the conversation before they know exactly what to say. They start the business before everything is figured out, and they learn along the way. Not because they're reckless, because they understand that perfection is a destination you never reach. It's a horizon that recedes at the same speed you walk toward it. Seneca said it with brutal clarity. It is madness to prepare for life while life is slipping away. And that's exactly what you're doing when you wait to be ready. When you wait for the perfect plan. When you wait to eliminate all risk. When you wait to feel confident. You're preparing to live instead of living. You're rehearsing for a play that will never premiere. And time doesn't wait. Time doesn't care whether you're ready or not. Time just passes. And with or without you, the world keeps moving. Think about all the things you haven't done because you were waiting for the perfect moment. The business you didn't start because you didn't have all the capital. The book you didn't write because you didn't know how it would end. The relationship you didn't begin because you weren't sure you were good enough. The career change you didn't make because you didn't have all the certifications. The project you didn't launch because it wasn't polished to 100%. How many opportunities have you lost, waiting for a perfection that was never going to arrive? And here's the cruel paradox. While you're waiting to be perfect, someone with half your talent and twice your courage is already winning. Not because they're better, because they started. Because they understood that imperfect action always beats perfect preparation. Because they know you learn more in one day of action than in a year of planning. Because their priorities are clear. They prefer real progress over imaginary preparation. Epictetus taught something that sounds harsh but is freeing. Don't demand that events happen as you wish. Decide to wish that they happen as they do, and you will be happy. He wasn't preaching resignation. He was preaching action without the paralysis of perfection. He was saying, accept that circumstances will never be ideal. Accept that you'll never have all the information. Accept that you'll make mistakes. And act anyway. Because acting imperfectly is infinitely more valuable than planning perfectly and never acting. Studies on analysis paralysis confirm this. There's an optimal point of information. Too little information and you make stupid decisions. Too much information and you freeze. The optimal point is around 60 to 70% of the information. At that point, you have enough to make a reasonable decision, but not so much that you get stuck processing. The winners act at that point. The losers keep waiting for 80, 90, 100% of the information, which never comes, because you never have all the information. Life doesn't work that way. Marcus Aurelius faced this daily. Decisions about where to move troops, decisions about what to do with traitors, decisions about political alliances, decisions that affected millions of lives. And he never had all the information. He never had total certainty. But he decided anyway, because he understood that not deciding is deciding. That postponing a decision is choosing to let circumstances decide for you. And that almost always turns out worse than deciding imperfectly, but actively. Here's the 80% rule. If something is 80% ready, ship it. You'll learn 10 times more from real-world feedback than from endless internal tweaks. Your first version of anything will be bad anyway. Accept that. Embrace it. because your first version isn't the final product. It's your education. It's the price you pay to learn how to make the second version better, and the second version better, and the third even better. But if you never ship the first, because it isn't perfect, you never reach the good versions. Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, has a line everyone should tattoo on their brain: if you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you launched too late. Think about that. If your first version doesn't embarrass you, it means you waited too long. It means you spent too much time polishing before validating. It means you built the perfect ladder against the wrong wall, because only the real market, real users, real feedback can tell you if you're moving in the right direction. And the longer you wait to get that feedback, the more time you potentially waste moving in the wrong direction. Seneca practiced this actively. He published his thoughts knowing they weren't perfect, knowing they'd be criticized, knowing he himself would see them differently a year later. But he published them anyway, because he understood that unpublished thoughts help no one. That wisdom hoarded while waiting to be perfect is wisdom wasted. That it's better to give the world your imperfect version now than your perfect version never. And here's something no one tells you about perfectionism. It's not that you have high standards, it's that you're afraid of being judged, afraid of failing, afraid of not being as good as you thought, afraid of being seen as mediocre. So you use perfection as a shield, as an elegant excuse not to test yourself, as a way to keep the fantasy of your potential greatness intact without having to face your real capacity. And as long as you keep that fantasy alive, you never have to face the discomfort of the truth. Epictetus had a brutal practice for this. He told his students, "Ask yourself, what is the worst that can happen if you fail? Then accept that scenario fully, visualize it, make peace with it, and then act. Because most of the time, the worst that can happen isn't that terrible. You lose money, you can earn back. You bruise your ego, and it heals. You look foolish in front of people who will forget in a week. The real cost of failing is almost never as high as your mind makes it seem. But the cost of never trying is absolute. It's a whole lifetime wondering what might have been." So here are your 3 tools to kill perfectionism. First tool, the 80% rule. If something is 80% ready, ship it. Don't wait for 90. Don't wait for 100. 80 is enough to learn. And learning is more valuable than polishing. Second tool, create real pressure. Tell someone your launch date. Make it public. Commit before you feel ready. When I decided to get my first client, I told myself, if I don't get someone before the end of this semester, I'm wasting my time. That pressure forced me to move. It forced me to ship imperfectly. And that imperfect launch taught me more in 1 week than months of preparation. Third tool, action over analysis. Every time you catch yourself overthinking, overanalyzing, waiting for more clarity, ask, what's one thing I can do in the next 10 minutes to move forward? Then do it immediately, not the perfect thing, just the next thing, because momentum beats perfection, progress beats plans, action beats preparation, always, in every context, in every situation. Marcus Aurelius wrote something that should be everyone's mantra. Don't worry about acting perfectly. Worry about acting at all. He knew that in war, in politics, in life, perfection is impossible. But action is possible. And imperfect action, compounded over years, is what builds empires. What writes books. What creates businesses. What changes lives. not perfect preparation, imperfect action. Think about all the things you've studied but never implemented, all the courses you bought but never finished, all the books you read but never applied, all the plans you made but never executed. Why? Because studying is safe, planning is safe, preparing is safe, but executing is risky. Executing means you might fail, that you might discover you're not as good as you thought, that you might confront your real limits, and your brain will do anything to avoid that, including keeping you permanently in preparation mode. The most successful entrepreneurs aren't the ones with the best business plans. They're the ones who ship fast, fail fast, learn fast, and adjust fast. Jeff Bezos didn't wait for the perfect platform before launching Amazon. Mark Zuckerberg didn't wait to have every feature before launching Facebook. Airbnb started with air mattresses in an apartment. Uber started with just a few cars in San Francisco. They didn't wait for perfect. They waited for good enough to start learning. Steve Jobs had a principle at Apple. Real artists ship. Real artists ship. They publish. They launch. They don't stay in the studio polishing forever, because they understand that art isn't art until it's in the world. Your project isn't a project until someone else sees it. Your skill isn't a skill until it creates value for someone. Perfection in private isn't perfection, it's illusion. Here's the capture moment. Perfection doesn't exist. It's a horizon that recedes as you move toward it. While you're waiting to be ready, the world keeps moving. While you're waiting to eliminate all risk, someone with less talent and more courage is already winning. While you're waiting to feel confident, opportunities evaporate. Imperfect action today is worth more than perfect action someday. Because someday isn't a day of the week. Someday is where your dreams go to die. So stop rehearsing, stop preparing, stop waiting, and start. Imperfect, incomplete, uncertain, but starting. Because the only real failure is never trying, and the only way to never fail is to never act. And that isn't safety, that's a living death. 10th Stoic lesson. Today is the only tomorrow that really exists. Seneca wrote something that should jolt you awake. It is not that we have little time, but that we waste much of it. Read that again, slowly. You don't lack time. You're squandering it. You're wasting it. You're giving it away to distractions, to worries, to plans you never execute, to tomorrows that never arrive. And every day that passes is a day you never get back. No matter how much money you make, no matter how much power you accumulate, you can't buy time. You can't recover yesterday. You can't pause your life while you decide what to do with it. The tomorrow you're waiting for won't arrive with more discipline. It won't arrive with more energy. It won't arrive with more clarity. That tomorrow is an illusion your brain created to avoid the discomfort of acting today. And every day you wait, you are consciously choosing not to be who you said you would be. You are choosing the fantasy of the future over the reality of the present. You are choosing imaginary potential over real progress. Marcus Aurelius understood this with a clarity that's terrifying. He wrote, "Do not act as if you were going to live 10,000 years. Death hangs over you. While you live, while you can, be good." It wasn't pessimism. It was brutal realism. It was reminding himself every day that time is limited, that every day matters, that tomorrow is not guaranteed, and that the only way to live without regret is to live today as if it were the only thing you have, because it might be. Think about how you live, as if you had infinite time, as if you could postpone indefinitely, as if there were always a tomorrow where you'll finally do the things that matter. But the math is simple and brutal. You have about 4,000 weeks of life if you make it to 80. 4,000, not 4 million, not 400,000, 4,000. And if you're 30, you've already spent 1,500. If you're 40, you've already spent 2,000. If you're 50, you've already spent 2,500. How many do you have left? And how many of those are you going to waste waiting for the perfect moment? Epictetus practiced something he called memento mori. Remember that you will die, not to depress yourself, to clarify, to strip away the trivial, to focus on the essential. Because when you truly internalize that your time is limited, you stop wasting it on things that don't matter. You stop postponing important conversations. You stop avoiding the projects that scare you. You stop living as if you had infinite time, and you start living as if every day counts, because it does. The Stoics practiced a specific visualization. Every night before sleeping, they imagined that this day might have been their last. They asked themselves, if I died tonight, would I be satisfied with how I lived today? Did I say what I needed to say? Did I do what I needed to do? Did I treat people the way I want to treat them? Did I move toward who I want to be? It wasn't morbid, it was clarifying, because that question removes everything superfluous. It leaves only what's essential, and the essential is what you're always postponing. Seneca had people who came to him saying, I'll start living when I retire, when my kids grow up, when I pay off my debts, when I have more money, when I have more time. And he asked them something devastating. What if you don't make it to that moment? What if you die before then? Then what? Did you live an entire life preparing for a life that never actually began? There is no comfortable answer to that question. There is only the uncomfortable truth that postponing life is choosing not to live. And here is the most painful part. It's not the things you did that you'll regret at the end of your life. It's the things you didn't do. It's not the mistakes you made. It's the risks you didn't take. It's not the times you failed. It's the times you didn't even try. Because mistakes can be corrected, failures can be overcome, but lost opportunities never return. Lost time is never recovered, and the regret of what you didn't do is the heaviest of all. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire but wrote as if he knew any day could be his last. And he did know. He faced multiple assassination attempts. He lived in constant war. He watched 8 of his 13 children die. Death wasn't abstract to him. It was real. It was close. It was constant. And that's what gave him clarity. It gave him urgency. It gave him the ability not to postpone what mattered, to write even when he was tired, to be virtuous even when it was difficult, to act even when he wasn't sure, because he knew tomorrow wasn't guaranteed. So here is your most important exercise. You're going to write your obituary, not the one others would write about you now, the one you want written about you when you die, specific, honest. What do you want them to say you achieved? What do you want them to say you stood for? What do you want them to say about how you treated people? What do you want them to remember about you? Write it. All of it. Without editing yourself, without being modest, without being realistic. Just write the truth of how you want to be remembered. Then ask the brutal question, if you died today, could they write that obituary? Or would they have to write something completely different? Something about someone who had potential but never realized it? Someone who had dreams but never pursued them. Someone who planned a lot but did little. Someone who was always going to start tomorrow but never started today. That gap between the obituary you want and the obituary they'd have to write today is your work. That's your purpose. That's what you should be doing today, now, not tomorrow. Epictetus said something that sounds simple but is transformative. Do what is within your power. The rest will sort itself out, or not at all. You can't control whether you'll live until tomorrow. You can't control whether you'll get the chance to fix your mistakes. You can't control whether people will forgive you, but you can control what you do today. You can control how you live this moment. You can control whether you act or postpone. And that's enough. You don't need to control the future. You need to control the present. And here's the beautiful paradox. When you stop living for the future and start living for today, the future you build is better. Not because you plan less, because you act more. Not because you care less about tomorrow, because you stop sacrificing today on the altar of a tomorrow that may never come, because you understand that the only path to the future you want is through the present you have. And you can't skip the present. You can't postpone today to live better tomorrow. You can only live better today. And when you live better today, every day, the future builds itself. Seneca wrote on his deathbed something that sums it all up. I have lived well because I have lived fully each day. He didn't say he lived well because he achieved a lot. He didn't say he lived well because he was famous. He said he lived well because he lived fully each day, without postponing, without saving his best version for later, without waiting for the perfect moment, just living fully today. Marcus Aurelius died on a military campaign, in a tent, in the cold, far from Rome, not in his bed, not surrounded by comforts, but he died having lived, having written, having acted, having been the person he decided to be, not perfectly, but consistently. He didn't wait for retirement to write his philosophy. He didn't wait for peace to practice virtue. He didn't wait for ideal conditions to be who he was. He lived today, every day, and that's why we remember him 2,000 years later. So here is your final task, and it's simple but brutal. Ask yourself, if today were my last day, what would I do differently? What would I say that I haven't said? What would I do that I haven't done? Who would I call? What would I start? What would I finish? What would I forgive? What would I let go? Make that list in your mind right now. Everything you would do differently if you knew this was your last day. Now the uncomfortable part. Why aren't you doing those things today? Why are you waiting? What guarantee do you have that you'll have tomorrow? What makes you think the last day comes with a warning? It doesn't. No one tells you, hey, this is your last day, so you'd better live fully. The last day looks exactly like any other day, except it's the last. And if you lived it like all the other days you wasted, then you died without having lived. Steve Jobs, in his famous Stanford speech, talked about death as the most important tool for change in life. He said, "Remembering that you are going to die is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose." And he was right. When you truly internalize your mortality, the fear of failure becomes ridiculous. The fear of judgment becomes irrelevant. The fear of embarrassment becomes trivial. Because the only thing that really matters is that you used your time, that you spent it on things that matter. There's a devastating statistic. 80% of people on their deathbeds don't regret the things they did and failed at. They regret the things they never tried, the risks they didn't take, the conversations they didn't have, the dreams they didn't pursue, the trips they didn't take, the people they didn't tell they loved. They don't regret their actions. They regret their inactions, their postponements, their tomorrows that never came. Here is the final capture moment. The tomorrow you're waiting for doesn't exist. It's a fantasy, an illusion, an excuse. The only thing that exists is today, this moment, this breath, this decision. And what you do with this moment will determine whether you lived or whether you simply existed waiting to live. There is no dress rehearsal, no draft, no second chance for today. When this day ends, it's gone forever. And the question is, did you use it? Did you live it? Did you move forward? Or did you waste it waiting for a tomorrow that is never guaranteed? Because today is the only tomorrow you really have. And every moment that passes without action is a moment of your life you will never get back. So stop waiting, stop planning, stop preparing, and live today, now, fully, as if it were the only thing you have, because it is. The Stoic Awakening, from procrastination to conscious action. You've made it here. 10 lessons, 10 truths the Stoics discovered 2,000 years ago and that modern science confirms today. 10 psychological shifts that separate those who dream from those who build, those who plan from those who execute, those who live from those who merely exist. But here is the final truth you need to hear. Knowing is not enough. Understanding is not enough. Agreeing is not enough. Because knowledge without action is just entertainment. It's another thing you consumed that changed nothing. It's another promise you made to yourself that you won't keep unless you do something different in the next 10 minutes. The Stoics didn't write philosophy for you to read it. They wrote it for you to live it. Marcus Aurelius didn't write the Meditations to publish them. He wrote them to remind himself who he had decided to be. To stay clear in the middle of chaos. To not get lost in the demands of the empire and forget his humanity. Those words were action. They were practice. They were life, not theory. Seneca didn't write letters to sound smart. He wrote them to help Lucilius live better, to give him real tools for real problems, to show him that philosophy is not something you study. It's something you do, something you practice, something you live every day, or you don't understand it at all. Because understanding Stoicism is practicing Stoicism. There is no separation between knowing and doing. If you know but don't do, then you don't know. Epictetus was a slave. His leg was broken. He lived without physical freedom. And yet he was freer than most people who have never known chains. How? Because he practiced. Because he took ideas and turned them into actions. Because he didn't wait for perfect conditions to become who he wanted to be. He decided to be free in his mind and acted from that freedom every day until it became real, until his body was freed because his mind already was. So here you are, with 10 lessons, with 10 tools, with 10 truths that can change your life if you use them, but only if you use them. And using them doesn't mean memorizing them. It doesn't mean repeating them. It doesn't mean agreeing with them. It means implementing them. 1. Now. Today. Not all of them, not 10 changes at once. 1. Choose one. The one that resonated the most, the one that made you the most uncomfortable, the one you most needed to hear. And commit to that one for 2 weeks. Not perfectly, but consistently, never failing 2 days in a row. with real consequences if you don't follow through, with imperfect action over perfect preparation, with today as if it were the only thing you have. Because here's what will happen if you do nothing different. You'll close this episode, you'll feel inspired, you'll think, yeah, this is what I needed to hear. You'll promise yourself you'll start tomorrow. You'll visualize your future self doing all these things, and tomorrow you'll wake up exactly the same, with the same excuses, with the same fears, with the same procrastination, because nothing changed. You just consumed content, and consuming content doesn't change lives. Acting on content changes lives. And here's what will happen if you do something different. If in the next 10 minutes you take one action, one single action based on what you just heard, you'll break the pattern. You'll show your brain that this time is different, that this isn't another empty promise, that this is the beginning of something real. And that moment of imperfect but real action, is where everything changes. Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, now. The Stoics believed that everyone has a moment of awakening, a moment when you stop living on autopilot and start living consciously. A moment when you stop being a victim of your circumstances and become the architect of your destiny. A moment when excuses stop working and action becomes inevitable. This can be that moment for you, but only if you choose it to be, only if you act like it is. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The perfection of character is this, to live each day as if it were your last, without frenzy, without apathy, without pretense." Living each day as if it were your last doesn't mean living with neurotic urgency. It means living with conscious intention. It means not postponing what matters. It means not wasting time on what is trivial. It means being who you decided to be today, not tomorrow. And if you decide to implement these lessons, if you decide that today is the day procrastination stops winning, then you'll need reinforcement. You'll need constant reminders. That's why I invite you to subscribe. Not to consume more content, but to have a weekly reminder that your decisions today build your reality tomorrow. To get new Stoic perspectives that keep you on track when you want to fall back into old patterns. Because here's the truth about change. It's not an event. It's a process. It's not one decision. It's 1,000 small decisions made every day. It's not inspiration that comes and goes. It's commitment that stays even when inspiration disappears. And that process is easier when you have reminders, when you have reinforcement. Subscribe because you need the commitment. You need the declaration that this matters to you. You need the weekly reminder that your life is your responsibility. You need additional tools to maintain your momentum. Because momentum is what saves you when motivation fades, and motivation always fades. Epictetus said, "Don't say what you're going to do it, and then talk about what you did. So don't tell me you're going to change. Don't promise me that now you will. Don't tell me your plans. Just act. Take one decision in the next 10 minutes based on what you heard. One. Then take another tomorrow. Then another the day after. Never failing 2 days in a row. And when you look back 6 months from now, you won't remember this episode for the ideas it shared. You'll remember it for the decision you made after listening, for the action you started, for the pattern you broke, for the person you decided to become. Because ideas are interesting, but actions are transformative. And you don't need more ideas, you need more action. The Stoics lived impossible lives and left immortal wisdom, not because they were perfect, because they were consistent, not because they never doubted, because they acted despite doubt, not because they had all the answers, because they moved with the answers they had. And that's all you need to do. Move with what you have, from where you are toward where you want to go, one step at a time. This is your moment, not tomorrow, now. This moment where you decide whether the next few hours will be different or just more of the same. This moment where you decide whether your life changes or whether you just consumed another piece of content and stayed the same. This moment where procrastination loses its power or where it tightens its grip. This moment is all you have. Live like the Stoics lived, with absolute awareness that time is limited, with brutal clarity about what matters, with the courage to act imperfectly, with the consistency to never fail 2 days in a row, with consequences to keep yourself honest, with respect for your body as your tool, with attention to your procrastination as your compass, with detachment from perfection, and with urgency, because today is the only day that really exists. There's something I want you to understand viscerally. This moment, this precise moment while you're hearing these words, is the most important moment of the entire episode. Not the beginning, not the middle, this moment, because this is the moment where you decide whether everything before was entertainment or transformation. This is the moment where philosophy becomes action or evaporates into the air like all the other inspiring things you've heard and forgotten. The Stoics had a concept called kairos. It's different from chronos. Chronos is chronological time. Kairos is the opportune moment, the decisive moment, the moment when everything can change. And this is your kairos. Not tomorrow, not next Monday, now. This moment you are living while these words enter your ears. This is your turning point, if you decide it is. Marcus Aurelius wrote something that should be burned into your soul. The perfection of character is this: to live each day as if it were your last, not as if you had all the time in the world. As if this were your last day. If today were your last day, what would you do? Would you keep postponing? Would you keep waiting for the perfect moment? Would you keep planning without executing? Or would you do the thing you've been avoiding? Have that conversation. Make that decision. Take that step. And here's something few people understand. Transformation is not an event. It's a decision followed by another decision followed by another decision. You don't wake up one day transformed. You wake up one day and decide to act differently. Then you make that same decision tomorrow, then the day after. And eventually, the sum of those decisions is a different life. But it all starts with the first decision, and that first decision has to be now. Because here's the deepest truth of all. You are not who you were a year ago. You are not who you will be a year from now. You are who you decide to be in this moment. And that moment of decision is not abstract. It's not philosophical. It's this precise moment where your hands hold this device, where your ears hear these words, where your brain processes these ideas, and where your will must turn into action. Stoicism is not a philosophy to admire, it's a philosophy to practice, and practice begins now, not when you understand everything, not when you feel ready, not when circumstances are perfect, now, with doubt, with fear, with imperfection, because that is the only way philosophy becomes life. When you take it from the world of ideas into the world of actions, when you stop being a student and become a practitioner, tomorrow never comes. Only today, only now, only this moment. Use it or lose it forever. Your voice matters here more than you think. Every insight you share strengthens and elevates this community, because this isn't just another space. It's a circle of people who choose to live with intention, with discipline, and with character. Each of you leaves a mark, and the reflection that receives the most support will be pinned as a banner of who we are. Not as decoration, but as a reminder of the kind of warrior who chooses to think, feel, and act with stoic clarity. Because this is a community that doesn't run from pain, it walks through it with courage. A community that doesn't look for cheap comfort, it seeks wisdom. A community that doesn't break under adversity, it turns it into strength. And if you've made it this far, it's because something inside you is already shifting. Something is waking up. Something is asking for more. So, before you leave, check the description. There you'll find the paths we created to help you keep strengthening your mind. They're not there by accident. Each one exists to help you go deeper, build inner resilience, and return again and again to that place within you where nothing and no one can take your peace. Subscribing isn't doing the podcast a favor. It's an act of respect toward yourself. It's choosing not to live on autopilot anymore. It's committing to think differently, to feel with more order, to live with more intention. Because every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we publish reflections designed to stay with you when life gets heavy, when your mind gets loud, when you need a reminder of who you are. Not following us means risking missing the one lesson you might need in the hardest moment. And if you choose to go a step further, if you choose to become a member, understand one thing clearly. You're not donating, you're sustaining a mission. Because of you, this flame stays alive. Because of you, we can keep spreading Stoicism as a refuge for millions who are fighting not to give up. Your support is what keeps this podcast alive, strong, and growing. You're not a spectator, you're part of the foundation holding this community together. I'll see you in our next Stoicism for Winners session, where we'll keep exploring the depth of Stoic wisdom applied to everyday life. In the meantime, dive into the recommended sessions in the description and continue your path. And until we cross paths again, don't forget this. You are the master of your perception, the guardian of your peace, and the warrior of your own battle. That is the legacy of Stoicism. That is the art of becoming invincible.